Chapter 1 Frontier Bar, 3 a.m. On a desolate night of frontier life, James Aldrich's fingers glided across the scratched and worn surface of an old oak bar counter, polishing glasses that had seen better days under the dim light. The sound of metal against glass was familiar to his ears, a constant companion in this quiet establishment far from Earth's orbit. Frontier Station was a place where travelers sought refuge for brief moments before moving on. It wasn't known as a destination, but rather an escape. The air inside the bar was thick with scents of spilled drinks and old smoke, mingling with the faint aroma of fried grease that had wafted in from the kitchen just beyond. Outside, a cold wind howled around the station's metal frame, as if trying to push against the vacuum sealing it away from space. James hummed softly under his breath, the low vibration resonating through his chest. The habit had picked up during quiet nights like these, when memories seemed closer than ever before. His silver-streaked hair fell over his eyes as he leaned in to clean another glass, a reminder of time passing far too quickly and battles fought long ago. Suddenly, an intense beam of light sliced across the dark sky outside, shattering the calm silence with its sudden brilliance. James paused mid-polish, squinting towards the shuttle pad where only moments earlier there had been nothing but darkness. Now, as he watched through a small window by the door, another pulse of light followed a shuttle landing directly in front of him. A chill ran down his spine. Shuttles rarely made such an ostentatious arrival here on Frontier Station. Most travelers opted for more discreet entry points or simply used personal ships to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. This was unlike anything James had seen before. He placed the polishing rag back onto the bar and walked slowly towards the door, his footsteps echoing slightly in the quiet space. As he reached it, a figure cloaked from head to foot stepped into view, silhouetted against the bright light outside. The hood covered their face entirely, leaving James uncertain as to what had just entered. "Whiskey," came the voice without any preamble or acknowledgement of him. It was low and resonant, with an accent that didn't belong on this side of space, a language more refined than he was used to hearing here in the frontier region. James nodded once before moving to pour a drink for his new customer, while keeping one eye trained outside, where several figures had now gathered around the shuttle's open door. He handed over the glass, placing it gently onto the bar counter in front of their visitor without comment. The stranger took up the drink, tilting back enough liquid to taste, but not enough to quench whatever thirst they carried. For a moment, there was only silence between them, James returning to his polishing work, and this individual sipping quietly at their whiskey. Yet James couldn't help feeling as though he were being watched. Every movement from the figure felt deliberate and calculated rather than simply casual observation. Finally, breaking the quietness, the cloaked person set down the half-empty glass with a clink against cold porcelain. They spoke again. "Do you remember me, human?" The question caught James off guard, his hand pausing mid-air as he held another glass in preparation for polishing yet again. For a moment confusion clouded over him, until recognition flickered across his face. So many years had passed since that fateful night when everything changed, too long ago to think of now. He didn't answer verbally, but instead walked around the bar towards her, eyes scanning from under heavy lids where war fatigue and countless nights kept their toll. Without a word, he pulled back the hood just enough with his gloved hand to reveal those telltale bioluminescent patterns on silver-blue skin, a face that once belonged to a scared little girl, now holding power over an entire empire. James' breath hitched slightly at seeing her, but all it did was raise one of Queen Seraphina Valketh's eyebrows in surprise, and perhaps recognition. She hadn't been prepared for such direct contact with the man she had spent so many years searching for across galaxies, only to find him here far from royal courts or war zones. "You," he began, voice rougher than usual as old memories surfaced alongside scars long healed both physically and mentally. Queen Seraphina tilted her head slightly at his reaction before pulling back fully to reveal herself completely in the bar's dim lighting. Her 4 eyes shifted colors with emotions he couldn't quite name, fear perhaps mixed with determination, a sight so rare that it almost stunned him into silence again. "I need you," she continued, voice steady despite whatever turmoil lay beneath her composure. "They are coming tonight to kill me." James stared at the woman who had once been a frightened child, held close by his hand through fire and smoke, now commanding an entire civilization, but struggling against assassins within its own walls. He felt himself nodding slowly before looking away towards the door, where footsteps sounded even closer than before. The sound of ships entering atmosphere signaled chaos about to unfold, bringing James back abruptly from reminiscence into present reality. And with that signal, all plans for a quiet night were shattered like glass underfoot. An old war hero faced once more with duty far beyond his retired life among bar patrons and forgotten tales. A&D the bar's front door burst open as a blast of cold air swept through, carrying with it the distant rumble of engines and the smell of smoke. Commander James Aldrich instinctively grabbed his rifle from under the counter, where he kept it hidden for just such an occasion. "James," Queen Seraphina Valketh said softly, her voice cutting through the sudden chaos like a knife. "They are here." He nodded without looking at her, already moving towards one of the back rooms to arm himself with weapons stored there. The old soldier in him was immediately alert and ready for battle once more. A moment ago, the bar had been filled only by whispers from patrons and the occasional clink of glasses. Now it seemed as if a storm had suddenly rolled into their quiet world. 3 assault shuttles landed nearby, their engines growling ominously, even before their bay doors slid open to reveal armed soldiers emerging. "Who are you looking for?" James asked Queen Seraphina, his voice low but clear amidst the commotion. She turned her 4 eyes toward him as they glowed a deep violet with urgency. "General Krathvos wants me dead," she replied firmly. "He believes war is the only way forward, and I am stopping it." The first signs of conflict began to materialize around them, distant crackle of energy blasts, shouts from outside filtering in through broken windows, alarms blaring throughout the station. James's hand tightened on his rifle as he glanced at Seraphina. "We need to get you out," he declared without hesitation, eyes narrowing slightly with determination. "There's a back door that well use." Before she could reply, there was an explosion nearby, fire and smoke billowing up from the street below their bar. Glass shattered inwardly as debris scattered throughout the room. "Move," James barked, grabbing Seraphina by her arm gently but firmly despite her size advantage over him. She followed his lead without argument or delay, knowing better than to second-guess someone with such obvious combat experience embedded in every cell of their being. They ran through a narrow hallway and down several flights of stairs until they reached the back exit, where another set of explosions could be heard echoing closer now rather than farther away. The ground shook beneath them as James unlocked and kicked open the door to reveal chaos reigning outside. Zarathi soldiers scrambling around, taking cover from blasts coming their way. "Go," he said tersely yet kindly towards Queen Seraphina, who hesitated only for a moment before nodding resolutely in acknowledgment of his command. She turned swiftly on her heels, heading straight back into the fray, but stopping just long enough to give James one last hard look filled with gratitude, and perhaps respect. Either had ever been more clear between them. James didn't waste time watching, instead diving headfirst into combat mode, where every second counted far too much for comfort. Soldiers poured in through all available entrances of what used to be his sanctuary, but now was nothing short of a battlefield under siege. The air reeked of burning metal and ozone from plasma blasts. Bodies sprawled everywhere as the fighting grew intense. James fought with ruthless efficiency, his movements precise yet brutal against any who dared stand between him and protecting Seraphina's escape route. Flashbacks tore through every moment spent in combat, burning palace walls, consuming everything around them as he carried a small child wrapped tightly within protective arms, fire crackling dangerously close, while panic ruled the night. That little girl growing up into an elegant queen under stars he had never dared dream of seeing again, until tonight, when life brought her back unexpectedly. Yet, now was no time for nostalgia or regrets. Every fight must be won, if there were any hope left at all amidst this inferno erupting around them both once more after so many years apart. So James focused on each new threat with a stoic resolve born from countless battles fought and endured in his past career. James's old combat instincts kicked back into gear without pause, slicing through Zarathi soldiers one after another as if they were mere training dummies rather than living beings fighting for their lives or an empire's future. He barely glanced at fallen foes anymore, only ensuring none blocked Seraphina from reaching her escape shuttle parked safely outside. Clear path, he called out to her once more without breaking stride towards his own vehicle, where supplies and medical kits awaited, should they ever need them later amidst this carnage still unfolding around them even now under burning skies. Seraphina nodded sharply in response before running full speed toward the awaiting spacecraft, not pausing until reaching it. The pilot, who had remained hidden until this moment, quickly secured her inside, while James covered their retreat, keeping vigilant against any pursuers closing too closely behind during their getaway attempt back into orbit above all trouble. As they ascended towards safety, among stars twinkling far beyond reach of war's grasp yet again today, through sheer willpower alone, silence filled the air between them, once more broken only by distant echoes from below signaling continued struggle raging on without them now. James wiped sweat and grime off his face before tossing away spent casings and damaged equipment no longer needed under current circumstances anymore. Queen Seraphina watched him silently for a moment, with eyes reflecting countless emotions swirling with ingratitude, awe at seeing such resilience after so long having passed between their paths, crossing once more here amidst destruction, reclaiming peace temporarily stolen from them all too soon yet again tonight. Finally breaking the silence herself, despite uncertainty lurking underneath surface calm, she exhaled deeply. "Thank you," she began quietly, but sincerely, facing him directly this time around, her bioluminescence patterns shifting subtly with changing emotions now fully visible under ship lights. "For everything." James nodded in acknowledgement of both compliment and unspoken understanding between them. No need for words where actions spoke loud enough, already telling entire stories beyond mere statements ever could convey accurately. In orbit surrounding Frontier Station, once more safe from immediate danger, at least for time being, James turned back to watch the burning bar slowly fade into distance below, under smoke-filled skies. A place he had hoped would remain his sanctuary forever after retiring no longer seemed like much of one and more given to night's events unfolding unexpectedly despite best efforts beforehand ensuring otherwise. Yet even so far away, knowing she was safe mattered most now amidst current situation, rather than past regrets, or future uncertainties lingering ahead on horizon yet unexplored. Together again, between both worlds he had left long ago, an empire still struggling to find its own footing once more under changing times brought forth by war's shadow looming ever closer regardless of any one person's efforts alone. James Aldrich stood silent for several heartbeats longer before turning away from observation, poured back towards command station, where preparations awaited regarding next steps needed concerning both current crisis and possible aftermath following tonight's events, far below them still unfolding under chaotic circumstances, beyond control yet again. He knew better than to think otherwise despite brief respite gained amidst stars surrounding their fragile refuge above troubled ground. And thus, Chapter 2 ends exactly as the plot beat dictates, safe, for now, in orbit, after harrowing journey through burning streets and back alleys of Frontier Station brought forth, due to unforeseen circumstances, threatening stability far beyond mere bars confines ever intended during quiet nights spent reminiscing amidst whiskey bottles rather than active combat zones demanding every ounce bravery left within once more taken up arms against shadows lurking just outside reach yet always ready should vigilance falter even for single moment too long endured under watchful eyes now wary of unseen dangers still very real despite distance separating them from immediate threats posed by General Krathos tonight during failed coup attempt meant ending reign Queen Seraphina Valketh forever amidst flames consuming everything left standing once more after 20 years passing since those fateful nights, changing both their lives irrevocably. Chapter 3 Royal Shuttle. Seraphina sat across from James, her silver blue skin glowing softly, as she watched him out of the corner of her four iced wool large and two smaller ones that shifted subtly in color depending on what emotion flickered through her mind. The room was dimly lit with soft blue hues emanating from the walls, a stark contrast to the bustling activity outside their small chamber. General Krathos controls half the military, Seraphina said quietly yet urgently, as she leaned forward slightly towards James. The assassination happens at the Ascension ceremony in 4 hours. James's eyes narrowed with concern and determination, his fingers curling around a glass of what looked like some exotic Zarathi beverage, though it tasted more bitter than anything he had ever known before. He set it down firmly on the table between them. "One human against an army?" James asked, raising his eyebrow as if challenging himself just as much as Seraphina. She paused for a moment, her bioluminescence flickering slightly with what could only be interpreted as nervousness or hope intertwined tightly within those complex patterns. "You did it before," she replied firmly, though the sound of steel hitting stone from outside their compartment suggested that there were other forces at play beyond this single shuttle ride. James nodded slowly, taking in everything Seraphina had just said and processing its implications without breaking eye contact with her. There was something about those eyes, large and expressive that spoke volumes more than words ever could between them now after all these years, since their first meeting amidst chaos during war's fury. Seraphina continued cautiously, "I offer you anything in return. Wealth, title." Her voice trailed off as she noticed the skeptical look on his face. The idea of accepting such offers seemed foreign to him, a reminder of a life he had deliberately left behind when retiring from service years ago. "I'm not doing this for rewards," James said finally, after several silent moments, filled only with mutual understanding and respect shared silently through their gaze locked onto each other once more. Her eyes softened slightly, her bioluminescence patterns shifting to reflect the subtle warmth that now emanated between them. I understand," she murmured quietly before clearing her throat and returning back into business mode as needed. "The plan is simple: infiltrate the command ship undetected by loyal officers already on board who will assist us in reaching key locations within." James nodded again, more to himself than to Seraphina. No, it was a habit he couldn't break even after years away from active duty. The thought of returning to those days brought with it mixed feelings of reluctance and determination. "You know the risks," she continued softly but firmly, not needing to elaborate further as both were well aware what they stood against tonight amidst their mission to save her life once more under circumstances far different than last time so many years ago. James exhaled deeply, nodding once again, this time fully committing himself without hesitation to whatever fate awaited them in the coming hours ahead. He knew better than most how unpredictable and dangerous such situations could become, but trusted Seraphina's expertise and leadership implicitly nonetheless, given their shared history now stretching back decades since that fateful night of firelight years gone by. The tension within the compartment was palpable, each heartbeat echoing loudly between them amidst preparations unfolding silently beyond walls enclosing this momentary respite from stormy skies far below, waiting impatiently for its chance to strike once more under cover of darkness enveloping all in shadow, until dawn broke anew, promising fresh hope yet again still unfulfilled despite best efforts. Now the shuttle's engines hummed softly as it navigated through the stars, a sleek vessel designed for speed and stealth. Outside, the dark void of space stretched endlessly around them like an endless sea under moonlit waves where danger lurked just out of sight, always lurking beneath surface calm until ready to strike without warning ever given amidst shadows cast by celestial bodies passing overhead. Inside their compartment, James turned back towards Seraphina briefly before glancing outside at distant lights dancing across the horizon below, a reminder that no matter how far they traveled or how high up in atmosphere they ascended, above troubled ground still lay beneath, waiting patiently for its turn to reclaim what it once had lost long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. Seraphina followed his gaze momentarily, her expression softening ever so slightly, as if recalling distant memories of those same stars twinkling overhead when she was but a child caught in midst crossfire between forces vying endlessly still without end. Now 20 years later, on horizon stretching ahead, awaiting uncertain fate yet unfulfilled despite best efforts taken to change course once more from tragic path already set long ago. She turned back towards James, her bioluminescence patterns stabilizing into a softer blue hue as she spoke clearly and firmly. "The command ship will be our destination. We must move quickly. Every minute counts now." James nodded silently in response, his silver-streaked hair catching the faint light within compartment, creating sharp shadows across face etched deeply with lines of experience born from years spent amidst conflict, both recent past recently relived once more, and those long gone yet ever present, still haunting him nightly as dreams linger unresolved despite best efforts taken to lay ghosts, finally resting peacefully beneath stars twinkling overhead far above troubled ground below, now lying silently waiting turn at reclaiming what lost long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. Seraphina stood up abruptly, her movement graceful and fluid given height, standing nearly a foot taller than James, but moving with such ease, as if weightlessness of space had somehow imparted sense of lightness with an otherwise formidable presence towering above all others surrounding empire now facing uncertain fate still unfulfilled despite best efforts taken to change course once more from tragic path already set long ago. She held out her hand towards him, a silent gesture asking for cooperation and mutual trust shared between them both now amidst current mission unfolding ahead, without hesitation or doubt ever allowed entering equation, given stakes involved far beyond personal gain sought after tonight, but rather greater good, yet unfulfilled despite best efforts taken to change course once more from tragic path, already set long ago, under ashes scattered by war's flames. James looked down at her hand for a moment before reaching up slowly and taking it, their fingers interlocking briefly in silent acknowledgment of shared purpose now guiding them both amidst darkness stretching endlessly ahead towards uncertain fate still unfulfilled despite best efforts taken to change course once more from tragic path already set long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. The massive warship loomed large against backdrop stars twinkling far above, a looming presence signaling end of journey begun hours before now nearing completion amidst preparations unfolding silently beyond walls enclosing this momentary respite from stormy skies waiting impatiently for its chance to strike once more under cover of darkness enveloping all in shadow until dawn broke anew promising fresh hope yet again still unfulfilled despite best efforts taken to change course once more from tragic path already set long ago. James and Seraphina boarded the ship secretly, their presence unnoticed as they slipped through shadows into heart of command vessel now theirs for mission ahead amid stakes involved far beyond personal gain sought after tonight, but rather greater good yet unfulfilled despite best efforts taken to change course once more from tragic path already set long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. A&D Chapter 4 Warship Infiltration. James Aldrich crouched low as he slipped through a shadowed corridor on the warship's hull, his heart pounding despite the decades of experience under his belt. The air was thick and heavy with tension, each breath seeming to make more noise than it should in this near-silent environment. "Stay close," Seraphina whispered urgently beside him, her silver-blue skin glowing softly as she moved almost effortlessly ahead through the narrow passage. He could feel a soft warmth emanating from her bioluminescent patterns despite how cold and metallic everything else around them was. James' eyes darted back to check that his borrowed armor didn't give any undue sound or light away, even though it matched the design of Zarathi's security perfectly. "Ready," he responded in a hushed tone as they approached what looked like an access panel leading deeper into the ship's interior. The Queen knelt beside him and pressed several small buttons on her wrist communicator. A faint hiss followed by a soft click confirmed that the door had unlatched from their side, not needing to alert anyone stationed behind it. "Go," she murmured as they slipped inside together, eyes quickly scanning for any immediate threats in the dimly lit maintenance corridor beyond this entrance. It was an area he knew well after all these years of covert missions and escapes on alien vessels across various galaxies. But something felt different tonight. Stakes were higher now that their paths had converged once again. They moved swiftly down narrow hallways filled with intricate piping and wiring running alongside walls painted in muted grays and blues. The air smelled faintly metallic here, with an underlying scent of ozone from the proximity to electrical systems powering much of this warship's operations. Every step made a barely audible thud, but James kept his senses finely tuned for any sign that they weren't alone. Suddenly, Seraphina stopped abruptly, her four eyes shifting colors rapidly as she listened intently. Ahead. Wait, she mouthed silently toward him. James nodded and shifted into a combat-ready stance, hands gripping the plasma pistol he had scavenged earlier from a nearby guard station when their infiltration began. His heart raced at this sudden tension. Years of war still etched deep within his soul knew instinctively that danger lay just around corners, now leading deeper inward towards planned rendezvous points, a long route mapped out by Queen's own schematics, brought secretly aboard during the initial boarding process. Seraphina motioned him to follow her as she began creeping further ahead, moving silently toward the source of distant voices echoing faintly from an intersecting corridor up ahead. As they approached cautiously within range without alerting any nearby sentries guarding vital areas critical for mission's success tonight against forces loyalist Krathvos seeking usurp current rulers, throne once more following failed assassination attempt weeks earlier. The two figures conversed in hushed tones, voices too muffled initially to distinguish words clearly over constant hum of ship's engines and maintenance systems. But Seraphina paused abruptly mid-step when she caught distinct name being mentioned. Krathvos. Commander, whispered James under his breath as he readied himself for action if needed at a moment's notice. Seraphina turned sharply back toward him, her eyes glowing brightly in alarm. This way, she breathed, leading them around the corner swiftly into another maintenance passage where they could remain hidden, but still listen to ongoing discussion clearly now emerging directly from nearby room's open doorway ahead. Inside, two other figures stood beside a map displayed on holoscreen, one being Krathvos himself, flanked by an unknown assassin whose dark form blended menacingly with shadows surrounding him. The three spoke rapidly in their alien tongue about exact location of Queen's secret hideaway among maintenance levels far below main deck, where she planned final stand against usurpers' forces tonight. Too easy a target now that your fool plan failed, Krathvos hissed angrily, fingers clenching around hilt of energy sword beside him. Tonight must succeed regardless cost. A tense silence hung over room as Assassin nodded grimly in agreement before turning toward unseen guards stationed at entrance outside door. Time's running out, Seraphina whispered back urgently to James now that their cover had been compromised. We need to move quickly. James gripped his plasma pistol tightly, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers reassuringly despite sudden surge of adrenaline coursing through veins as they prepared themselves for inevitable confrontation ahead against forces loyalist Krathvos seeking usurp throne once more. Just then, a guard's voice shouted loudly from outside door, followed swiftly by heavy boots thudding rapidly toward their hiding place. Seraphina and James both tensed simultaneously, knowing escape route had just been cut off completely, now leaving them no choice but to face threat directly instead of slipping quietly away as originally planned earlier tonight. Commander, the voice shouted again in alarm mere moments before guard rounded corner into maintenance corridor where they lay hidden within shadows. James leaped forward with surprising speed despite age, plasma pistol firing almost instantly, sending powerful blasts tearing through enemy's chest armor until smoke and sparks filled air around. Fallen bodies sprawled motionless amidst wires strewn across floor. Another two guards appeared seconds later, rushing in to join battle already raging fiercely between James and Seraphina. against Krathvo's loyalists, now converging from all sides within this confined space. With each passing moment, fight grew more chaotic as flashes of energy bolts danced everywhere, while cries of pain echoed loudly off walls surrounding them. Seraphina fought with an elegance and grace that belied her regal stature. She moved fluidly through the melee, striking swiftly yet precisely, targeting nerve clusters on enemies' bodies to incapacitate rather than kill whenever possible. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered wildly as emotions surged within: regret, determination, resolve. Meanwhile, James fought with a deadly efficiency born of decades spent honing skills amidst countless battles and wars, though slower, now compared youthful years. Every strike still packed lethal force despite plasma burn already searing his left shoulder from earlier skirmish. He felt the familiar rush of adrenaline flooding through veins once again as combat instincts kicked in fully. One final guard lunged at him with an energy blade, but James sidestepped deftly and fired a precise shot into guard's kneecap before delivering crushing blow to head that sent him crashing unconscious against bulkhead behind. Seraphina staggered slightly towards them, now dragging wounded form of Krathvo's loyalist, who had managed to land several hits on her earlier, despite valiant efforts defending herself. Throughout ongoing firefight, blood streaked across lower half of her body from multiple minor wounds sustained during intense engagement. James hurried over swiftly, catching sight of plasma burn already scorching through shoulder armor where she'd taken hit moments before. He could tell by grimace forming briefly upon impact that pain was considerable despite how well-trained and resilient Zarathi warriors were known to be across many planets visited throughout career as Special Forces commander, saving countless lives, including one queen now lying injured in his arms amidst ruins of battle still raging fiercely around them. "We need to get out," he said, voice steady yet urgent. "Mo-V." She nodded through gritted teeth, and together they dragged Krathvo's incapacitated lieutenant back into shadows just as more guards arrived with reinforcements heading toward sounds of ongoing conflict now erupting loudly from maintenance corridors below main deck, where battle had shifted far away from original plan set in motion hours ago. Seraphina found an open lift panel nearby, its light blinking faintly through narrow gap. "In here," she gasped out hurriedly as they slipped inside together before sealing access point tightly behind them, cutting off pursuing forces once more from reaching target location so easily now despite best efforts taken earlier tonight to prepare for every contingency possible beforehand. James pressed his back against cold metal walls, wincing slightly at throbbing pain emanating sharply through shoulder where burn mark was already darkening into sickly hue amidst surrounding fabric still charred black by intense heat. Seraphina leaned heavily against opposite wall, eyes glowing softly, now filled with tired yet resolute determination despite current injuries sustained earlier. 90 minutes, she stated quietly, after momentary silence had fallen over cramped confines within lift shaft leading upwards towards unknown fate awaiting them once again amidst ongoing struggles to change course from tragic path already set long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. Wounded, hunted, deep in enemy territory, James and Seraphina now found themselves cornered inside this small metal box, rising upward toward uncertain destiny still lying ahead of them despite best efforts taken earlier tonight amidst ongoing struggles to change course once more from tragic path already set long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. Chapter 5 Throne Room. The vast throne room of Zarathi Palace was an imposing sight even under normal circumstances. But tonight, it pulsed with tension and fear. Elaborate carvings adorned the walls, depicting ancient battles between noble warriors clad in ornate armor, their bioluminescent skin gleaming softly beneath the ambient lighting that shifted from deep blues to vibrant purples, depending on the time of day or night. The air smelled faintly metallic, mixed with a lingering scent of smoke and burned wood, a remnant of events that had transpired decades ago. High above the floor, a series of balconies lined the walls where loyal guards took their posts, each one armed to the teeth and watching for any sign of betrayal or danger. But tonight's ceremony was not meant to be about such things. It was supposed to celebrate peace between worlds, an alliance forged through bloodshed, but now healing in its wake. Silence fell as Queen Seraphina stepped into view alone, her silver blue skin glowing softly under the changing lights around her. She moved with a grace and confidence that belied any fear she might have felt inside. Yet it was clear something else drove this queen forward tonight, a mission of redemption. After so many years passed since she had been rescued from burning flames by an unlikely hero, every weapon aimed at Seraphina as soon as she entered, the air thick with hostility, but also reverence for what she represented, a legacy reborn and forged anew in defiance against those who sought to tear it apart once more. I survived the burning palace because a human showed me true strength protects, not destroys, Seraphina declared loudly enough for everyone within earshot to hear her message clearly. At this signal, loyal guards hiding amongst shadows revealed themselves with blinding speed. But they were outnumbered by those who wished harm upon their queen's return from long exile into distant lands where humans lived in peace among stars far beyond Zerathi dominion. A cacophony of alarms and gunfire erupted instantly as battle lines hardened. Krathvos, the leader of rebels bent on seizing power for himself at any cost, even when it meant overthrowing rightful ruler who had done nothing but lead with compassion after long years spent rebuilding fractured empire from ground up under ashes left by war's cruel hand. He charged forward wielding a gleaming energy blade aimed directly toward Seraphina's heart. The air crackled and spat with the sound of plasma fire, echoing sharply off cold metal walls as loyal guards clashed against rebels intent on seizing control once more. Guardsmen fought fiercely, their bodies moving in fluid motions honed over years under Queen's watchful eye. Yet even they were struggling now to hold back tide turning ever closer towards throne room itself. Seraphina staggered slightly amidst ongoing chaos, her silver blue skin streaked with blood from multiple minor wounds sustained during heated exchanges against Krathvos loyalists who refused to give up their bid for power. She dragged the injured form of one such rebel alongside her, his eyes wide and desperate as he clutched at her arm despite the agony. "We need to get out," James said urgently. Why beside them now, dragging another fallen guard's unconscious body away from main conflict zone while keeping close eye on Seraphina's condition through quick glances. "Move." Seraphina nodded once, though she grimaced briefly when plasma burn already scorching her shoulder armor flared up in response to sudden movement before quickly steadying herself again under James' reassuring grip that held tightly despite circumstances. "In here," she gasped out hurriedly as they slipped inside an open lift panel nearby where its light blinked faintly through narrow gaps still accessible even now amidst ongoing battle raging fiercely around them. She sealed access point tightly behind them, cutting off pursuing forces once more from reaching target location easily now despite best efforts earlier tonight to prepare for every contingency possible beforehand. James pressed his back against cold metal walls, wincing slightly at throbbing pain emanating sharply through shoulder, where burn mark was darkening into sickly hue amid surrounding fabric still charred black by intense heat. Serafina leaned heavily against opposite wall, eyes glowing softly now filled with tired yet resolute determination despite current injuries sustained earlier. 90 minutes, she stated quietly, after momentary silence had fallen over cramped confines within lift shaft leading upwards towards uncertain destiny, awaiting them once again amidst ongoing struggles to change course from tragic path already set long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. Wounded, hunted, deep in enemy territory, their situation was dire, but not without hope just yet, as they found themselves cornered inside small metal box rising upward toward unknown fates still lying ahead of them despite best efforts taken earlier tonight amidst ongoing struggles to change course once more from tragic path already set long ago under ashes scattered by war's flames. Suddenly, the lift jolted violently and came to a grinding halt mid-rise. Serafina stumbled forward into James' arms as they both braced themselves against cold metal walls, breath catching in their throats with tension mounting exponentially now that safety net had failed them yet again. "We have to find another way out," James said firmly, though his voice held tremor of uncertainty beneath surface layered by years of combat training. "We can't just stay here." Serafina nodded resolutely despite obvious pain evident across her features, eyes shifting towards dimly lit access panel nearby that led outward toward maintenance corridors outside lift shaft itself, where battle still raged fiercely against loyal guards fighting desperately to hold line amidst overwhelming numbers thrown at them by Krathvos and his followers. She pulled herself up with surprising strength considering current injuries, turning back towards James, who was already moving to assist her further. "There," she indicated access panel faintly glowing beneath dim red light filtering through small gaps still accessible despite ongoing efforts made earlier tonight to seal off all potential escape routes from within palace walls themselves. Together they slipped out quietly into narrow corridor beyond where sounds of battle could be heard clearly, even here amidst shadows and flickering emergency lights. James' senses were on high alert as he scanned surroundings for any signs of immediate danger, while Serafina moved silently beside him guiding path through labyrinthine network of maintenance tunnels used primarily by palace engineers, but now serving vital role in allowing them both to reach relative safety away from main conflict zones still raging fiercely outside. "We need to split up," James said suddenly, after a moment's silence had settled over corridor despite ongoing chaos beyond. "You take this route, it'll cover your back." Serafina looked at him hesitantly, but nodded once more, understanding weight of decision laid before them both, no each one risking everything they held dear in hopes that peace might finally be achieved after so many years spent rebuilding from ashes scattered by war's cruel hand. "Be safe," she said softly, though her voice was steady and resolved. James returned the sentiment with silent nod as he slipped away into shadows along opposite direction of corridor, where access ladder led upwards towards main deck above, chance to reach relative safety, if only for brief moment, amidst ongoing struggle unfolding below. Serafina turned back toward darkened maintenance tunnels that stretched out before her like winding path leading deeper into heart of palace itself, eyes glowing softly as she moved forward despite injuries sustained earlier during intense firefight. Her mind raced with memories past and present converging upon this pivotal moment where future hung in delicate balance between hope and despair. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots echoed through corridor behind Seraphina, who spun around, instantly recognizing telltale signs amidst dimly lit pace itself. Krathvos himself closing rapidly on their position, now that main conflict zones had been left far behind within palace walls themselves. He wielded energy blade with deadly precision, eyes glowing cold and calculating as he stepped forward, aiming directly towards Seraphina's heart once more. Seraphina raised defensive posture immediately despite injuries sustained earlier during heated exchanges against Krathvos loyalists who refused to give up their bid for power now that rightful ruler had returned from long exile into distant lands where humans lived in peace among stars far beyond Zarathi dominion. But before she could react further, a figure crashed through side door with blinding speed. James tackled Krathvos mid-stride, sending both of them crashing to ground amidst cacophony of sounds and lights around them as battle resumed once more amidst ongoing struggle for control over fate itself. "Stay here," James said gruffly, though breath caught in throat momentarily before he moved swiftly towards Krathvos, who was now scrambling frantically back onto feet despite being disoriented from sudden attack. Seraphina nodded sharply, even as she watched with grim determination unfolding scene once more amidst ongoing conflict raging fiercely around them. And James crashes through side door, tackling Krathvos mid-stride. James crashes through side door, tackling Krathvos mid-stride. The corridor was dimly lit by flickering emergency lights and filled with acrid smoke from distant fires that seemed to mock the precarious balance of power within the palace walls. James lunged forward just as a figure in dark armor rushed towards Seraphina, his energy blade glowing ominously. "Stay here," James said gruffly over his shoulder, even as he hit Krathvos with full force, slamming him into the ground and shoving him away from Seraphina, who had been frozen mid-step. The general snarled in surprise, but quickly regained composure, rolling to a crouch and leveling his blade at James. "Pathetic human," Krathvos spat, eyes glowing coldly as he assessed the damage done by their collision. "You think you can stand against me?" James' face twisted into an ugly grimace, dark circles beneath his tired eyes hinting at years of unyielding resolve and lingering scars from battles fought long ago in places most people couldn't imagine. He pulled a dagger out with practiced ease, the metal glinting briefly under harsh artificial light. "Maybe not," James replied gruffly, every word sharp as razors cutting through tension-filled air between them. "But I can stall you." Seraphina watched from behind cover. She had hastily found a service hatch that led to a utility shaft below, but her eyes never left the confrontation playing out above ground level. She felt a mix of dread and hope in this moment, knowing it was James's fate now hanging by an invisible thread within reach. "You have no honor," Krathvos sneered, energy blade crackling ominously as he prepared for what promised to be a swift end game against their intruder who dared interrupt his plans. "You fight like scavengers, Doherty." James laughed harshly despite the pain shooting through his ribs from earlier collisions with enemy troops during escape route through maintenance tunnels deeper into palace bowels. "That's because I know how this ends," he said, voice dripping sarcasm that seemed to mock Krathvos' inflated sense of self-importance and arrogance. Their movements were quick and lethal. Krathvos moved like a predator, with every strike calculated for maximum damage, while James fought back with raw instinct honed through countless battles under harsher conditions than anything this palace could offer. The air crackled around them from energy discharges as the fight raged on amidst ongoing chaos of battle unfolding elsewhere within grand halls and corridors. Krathvos struck again, aiming to decapitate, but James narrowly avoided it by ducking below outstretched arm, while sweeping his dagger across General's vulnerable side where armor was thinner. A thin line of blue blood trickled down as Krathvos roared in pain before retaliating with renewed ferocity. "Your time is over," James growled, eyes narrowing into fierce slits behind which blazed determination and something else. Something that spoke to the deep well of memories etched indelibly on his soul since day he had carried young Seraphina through Burning Palace long ago, when they were both younger versions of who they had become. Krathvos laughed derisively, energy blades slicing through empty air in sweeping arcs designed purely for intimidation rather than immediate attack. "You think you're anything but a relic from past struggles?" His voice dripped disdain and mockery, the sound echoing off cold metal walls around them as he closed distance again with renewed vigor. James lunged forward suddenly, pushing all previous injuries aside to focus entirely on and game playing out here in this cramped hallway where victory or defeat hung by threadbare promise of luck and skill. He grabbed Krathvos's wrist, holding weapon back, handing him into wall, but didn't let up there, instead twisted arm around, forcing blade towards General's own chest. Krathvos hissed in shock at unexpected turn, fighting fiercely against James' grip, but couldn't wrestle free fast enough before blade sliced through fabric of uniform and pierced skin. He staggered under blow, gasping for breath as crimson-stained front of armor beginning to bloom outward from point where steel had found flesh. James twisted wrist further, with finality, driving weapon deep into chest cavity, forcing Krathvos onto knees, still clutching dagger tightly despite bloodied hand trembling from exertion and pain mingling together in agonizing symphony. General looked up at him, eyes wide in disbelief before staring down, blade protruding grotesquely through his own body. "I told you," James panted harshly, though voice remained unyieldingly steady, amidst growing darkness clouding Krathvos' vision as life force began leaking away into floor below. "There's no honor." With last breath leaving him, Krathvos' eyes dimmed and body went slack against floorboards where he had fallen. The sounds of battle around them abruptly quieted down just for a moment amidst ongoing struggle unfolding elsewhere within grand halls beyond this corridor. Seraphina stepped forward hesitantly towards James, who was now kneeling beside fallen General, staring blankly at scene before him, trying to catch her breath from adrenaline rush still coursing through system along with lingering pain and fear that had threatened to overwhelm her earlier, but was finally receding under light of victory, achieved despite everything stacked against them. "James," she said softly yet firmly, as if acknowledging something significant between them which couldn't be denied anymore even when faced by overwhelming odds. "You did it." She reached out gently, laying hand on his shoulder, offering silent comfort he didn't seem to notice amidst foggy haze of battle fatigue and emotional turmoil swirling together inside him. Now that immediate threat had passed, but memories lingered painfully sharp. Outside corridor door opened, revealing soldiers rushing in response to sudden quiet after ongoing conflict within palace. Some loyalists of Krathvos who paused uncertainly, seeing their leader fallen before James, while others arriving from main combat zones further away sensing shift in tide against rebel forces now decisively turned back by Queen Seraphina's return and human warriors' relentless resolve. Seraphina addressed assembled troops, firmly yet kindly, voice resonating through halls filled with smoke and aftermath of battles fought just moments ago. "Your king is dead," she declared solemnly, but without malice or triumph in words chosen, instead offering calm reassurance after days and nights spent fighting against each other under false pretenses of power and control. "The time for division ends now," Seraphina continued, gaze sweeping over gathered soldiers, many of whom had looked away from sight of their fallen leader, but still listened intently as she spoke with authority built up through years spent governing this empire even when far across stars. "Together we rebuild what was destroyed because that is our future." Later that evening, under cover of darkness spreading across cityscape outside palace windows, Seraphina and James stood together amidst rubble-strewn corridors where combat had raged fiercest earlier in day, now mostly cleared away by cleanup crews brought in hastily once order restored within imperial halls. "James," she said softly, turning towards him finally, unable to maintain facade anymore even when standing before people who looked up at her with hope renewed, thanks largely due to actions played out here tonight. "There is so much I want to give you." He glanced back at her, silver-streaked hair catching faint glow from luminescent patterns along her skin as she stood there in full regalia of queen despite recent exhaustion and pain clearly etched onto face now visible close up. "I can't accept that," James replied quietly yet firmly, shaking head, gently cutting off whatever Seraphina might have been about to offer him, knowing well what kind of debt it would bind them both into future uncertain beyond immediate victory gained tonight. "But I'll take this." He looked deep into her eyes, seeing there something akin recognition mixed with gratitude and perhaps even affection that had grown over time but remained unspoken until now in aftermath of battles won. "Did you turn out okay, kid?" he asked softly, almost as if seeking reassurance from past self, who carried injured child through fire long ago when their fates first intertwined under tragic circumstances none could foresee then. Tears filled Seraphina's eyes, first moisture she had shed since that night 20 years prior, where her life was changed forever by humble soldiers' bravery in face of sea-ordained death. She nodded silently, voice catching briefly before forcing out answer through throat tight with emotion. "Because of you," she whispered finally, reaching forward gently to touch his cheek with one delicate hand, as if wanting to etch memory into skin for eternity. James' returned gesture, touching fingertips lightly against silver blue scales along her jawline, acknowledging silent bond between them that transcended words and even time itself, now sealed by bloodshed fought side by side in name of peace long sought after among stars. He would return soon enough back home, back where Bar awaited him, rebuilt amidst new lives forged from ashes left behind by war's cruel hand. But now he had something more, a connection to someone who called him friend and owed him nothing yet wanted everything within her reach, given freely without expectation or hesitation, because there was kind of bond forged when you save another's life twice. Seraphina visited his bar one day, not as queen, but simply as visitor Somione, whose story intertwined with his own in ways neither could have predicted long ago. They drank together amidst comfortable silence, where no words needed spoken to speak volumes about understanding shared now and future ahead that promised both challenge and possibility for those brave enough to embrace it. And so, under dim lights of a humble human bar, far from grandeur of Zarathi Palace, the tale came full circle, bringing end to chapter written in bloodshed fought side by side but sealed with mutual respect. Borne out tragedy turned into hope.